Howdy, guys, and welcome back to the Five Guys Podcast. Today, it is a Friday episode, a Five Friday episode, that is. We are recapping Monday's podcast with Chris and Paul DeLowery. A wonderful pod. If you didn't check it out, I highly recommend it. And yeah, let's get right into it. Chris, happy Friday, first of all. How was your
Happy
week?
Friday. My week's
Good
been
week?
great. Yeah, we just got back from Pittsburgh, so very fun week, and glad to be here recording, and glad to have survived the plane ride there and back. You know, it's sometimes tough to sit on a plane for that long.
What are we talking, 4 hours?
Yeah, going there was, I think, 5 hours because we had like a layover, maybe 6 hours with the layover, and then back was 4.5 hours. But on the plane ride back, we had a kid who was probably 5 rows back who was screaming bloody murder majority of the time.
Bro, that's crazy. I hope those moments never happen to you as a father.
We'll see.
We'll see, dude. We'll see, dude.
It's kind of a part of life. But it was almost comedic because, like, you know, when a kid cries, like, you get it. Like, a kid's going to cry. But, like, this kid was screaming bloody murder for hours. Like, I don't know how the child didn't, like, wear itself out and just, like, pass out.
Dude, I don't know how, obviously I'm not a parent. I'm just a concerned citizen. But, like, how does a mother or a father just, like, let that, like, I don't have that level of tolerance. I'd be like, all right, let's lock this down. What do you need? You need a binky, you need a snack, you need to sleep. What do you need? Let's get this on the road. I ain't got time for this, sir. But kids are on their own time schedule, I guess. So what can you do?
I don't know. I don't know enough about the subject, so I don't even want to approach it and get canceled in the comments.
yeah, exactly. Well, let's just get on to the recap. So, what was where should we even start? I love the pod. I'm hoping for a part 2. I don't know if he'll come back and entertain that. I know he has 2 different books, but yeah, where do we even start with this one?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to have him back. So when we first brought him on, we brought him on because I wanted to talk about probate because, you know, Paul by trade is a probate attorney. And before any podcast guests come on there, I try to learn as much as I possibly can about them. So he actually sent me 2 of his books. One was Probate Made Simple, which I wanted to talk to him about. But then when I read his book about creating generational wealth, you know, that's when I was like, we should probably talk about this more importantly, because I found that creating lasting wealth is probably a more important subject matter. Now, if you listen to the podcast on Monday, which I definitely recommend going back and doing, you'll see that we kind of moved around and we, you know, it was definitely a conversation where we had, you know, in our brains, whenever we do these podcasts, we think this is the way the conversation is going to go. But in truth, we can only improv. We just show up, Dominic and I, and we see what happens. We legitimately do it live and we just kind of follow the conversation where it goes. So you get to really get an insight into both myself and Dominic's thinking, because in a lot of situations, we're thinking through these things for the first time on the podcast too. So you really are getting raw, honest feedback. There isn't like, we don't script anything. We just kind of go for it, turn on the cameras and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just
you could definitely see that with Paul.
Yeah. And it was a beautiful conversation. You know, I was listening to it, and one thing you can really appreciate about someone is how open they can be. Like, right, you guys are total strangers, right? You've never met him. You're not college best friends, you know? But he was sharing such intimate details of his life and such beautiful things, but also things that are like really deeply personal. I mean, he talked about his father, and he opened up with how they used to go fishing and all these different things, and now he finds it appalling going to the grocery store to buy lettuce because like we used to just farm. It's like oh wow, that's interesting. And the whole saga with his mother and gaining money and losing money and the penny stocks. It's like a roller coaster movie. Like I could see it. I may be wrong. I may be wrong on this. I may be just like reaching, but I don't know. I feel like it would be a really interesting movie if it was turned into a movie. I'm like, dude, because there's just like so many like, oh my gosh. And like, I don't want to spoil anything, but like, and I'm only going to speak on this because you two had a good laugh on this at the end. But when his mother passed away, like she had said something to tell you. He's like, no, wait till morning. And it was just like the whole like story arc was just crazy. Mm-hmm. And how he got to where he is now, a published author, and how people treated him, when he tried to get hire a co-author, and they laughed him out, and he's like, I might not even do this book, but he kept persevering and shows this tenacity, and I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely commend him for coming on to the podcast and being so open. And I think that it's tough, right? Because you come onto a podcast and we drop this on YouTube, we drop this on many podcast players, and there's a lot of people that will listen to someone's story and just be like, you're such an idiot. Like, you're so stupid. I would never make those mistakes because I'm ordained by God to be intelligent all the time. And, we'll run into a keyboard warrior who might make people feel bad about themselves. But in truth, every single person has a story. And that story has ups and downs, but where do we learn from? We learn from those down moments, and those moments where he lost $14 million, those moments where he found out that, he had a different father, the moment where his mom died and his dad died, and all these things that happened to him in his life. We all have those moments in our life too, but we tend to not try to focus on those. And the thing that I respect about Paul is that he's really made it kind of his life's work, especially in writing this book. And we need to be willing to talk about that with not only, maybe not the community, maybe not the world. I think he's very brave for talking about this, like with the world at large on the internet. But I think more importantly, we need to have these conversations with our family, because if we hide what's going on in ourselves and the mistakes we've made, then our family can never learn from those things, and they may be destined to make the exact same mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know you guys talked a lot about the generational sin, right? Of not passing down knowledge and experience. And I think one thing that happens a lot in families is they'll pass down the good stories. When someone died, they were the greatest person, the honest, truthful. It's like, I knew that guy. He was a scumbag. He wasn't honest. Like, no. I think it's also important to pass down the bad stories, the lessons. Because so many times, if you don't pass down the lesson, it's just going to repeat. And it always repeats. I mean, you can see it in generation to generation to generation. And that's super sad. That's really, really sad to have knowledge and not share it, to have lessons and not learn from it.
Yeah. And when we talked about that, it made me think of a Jocko Willink book where he's talking about the dichotomy of leadership and making sure that we're always, leadership is always a dichotomy, like all of life is a dichotomy of two extremes. But where he talks about that we always want to tell our employees or the people under us the truth. And that doesn't mean you have to tell them every single part of the truth, but you need to tell them the truth, because if you don't tell them the truth, if you don't say, hey, we're going to have to start getting rid of some people because of budget cuts or because of whatever's going on in the economy, if you don't say anything and you just say everything's fine, and then all of a sudden people start seeing that, like, hey, the guy that was sitting next to me yesterday is now gone, and his desk is clear, the story they're going to come up with in their head is going to be far worse than the actual truth. The truth might be, hey, we're going to have to eliminate, 10% of jobs in order to keep us afloat. But if you're not upfront with people and you're just like, oh no, everything's totally fine, and they just see people disappearing, in their brain, they're going to go, we're going subsolvent. I need to jump ship right now. And it's the exact same thing with the stories of the families, rather than, most parents, they go ahead and they get themselves into credit card debt and they ruin their lives. Or let's just go with a different example. Some people, they'll go ahead and they get into investing, and they find out about penny stocks, and they start buying penny stocks, and they'll buy penny stocks, and then they grew this huge amount of money, and then they lost it all in a few weeks. And now they'll tell their kids, I invested in the market, and now all of our money's gone. If you invest in the market, it's akin to gambling. And now that generational sim of one person made a mistake, and they never learned from that mistake. They never learned, oh, maybe because I went down penny stocks, I shouldn't have done that. Maybe there was a different way of investing. Now they create the generational sin of every single kid from future believes that this stock market is gambling. And anytime you put your money in there, it's basically a flip of a tail, heads or tails, if I'm going to lose it or it's going to go big.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost more important I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this, because what you said was so interesting. Like, if you go into penny stocks and you lose all your money, all you're going to teach your kids is don't do penny stocks, don't do investing, right? It's a gamble, right? Not every lesson is a good lesson. And it's very difficult sometimes when you're younger and you have someone you look up to give you information about their life, and you trust them, you respect them. And it's bad information objectively, but you don't know that, right? If I came along and both my parents were like, don't do investing, like the reason we lost our house was because of that, like we lost everything, I wouldn't recommend it, right? You just went about your whole life never investing, just saving. You could probably tell us more what that would look like, Chris, because it would not be good, right? If you just
it would be there's an old saying, you can't save yourself to wealth. You can't save money under the bed your way to wealth. You have to invest in assets, things that are getting there. But I mean, think about like my generation, when I graduated high school, that was the peak of the 2008 subprime like mortgage lending thing. And I can still remember my dad like telling us stories of, oh, we just like lost everything. And in truth, we didn't lose anything. Everything was fine. We still had the house. He was still making his income. He was still going to work every single day. But in my brain, my dad told me like, we just lost everything because the stock market imploded. And in my brain, not understanding how any of this situation works, it's like, my God, he put all of his money into this magical investment thing, and some wizard back there decided that like he wants to implode all of it.
Yeah.
And, if you don't understand that the way the stock market works is that there's people every single day who wake up with whatever issue is going on, who say like, how can I make the world a little bit better? And the reason they want to make the world a bit better, so the world can give them money in terms of the value that they add. So if you look at it rather than what's going to change tomorrow, what's going to stay the same? What's going to stay the same is I think people, entrepreneurs are going to wake up every single day, no matter what's going on in the world, and say, what can I do to add value to this world in order for them to give me more value, which is more money, more accolades, more whatever it is that entrepreneur is seeking.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering, I know we talk a lot about the psychology of money, the psychology of habits and whatnot on this podcast, but I'm curious, was your view on money different before your father told you that? Or was that like the pivotal moment when like the scarcity mindset kind of developed?
No, I had a scarcity mindset the entire like growing up. I've always had a scarcity mindset. I think I was kind of born with it, but then also my upbringing impacted it more. But honestly, like investing wasn't even on my radar. Like I didn't even know, I didn't understand it at all at that time. And I was probably in high school, I was probably a junior or senior in high school when he made that, minor comment. He doesn't even remember it. Like he doesn't even remember saying it. Minor comment that he made. And for me, like investing, I never understood it. No one even in my circle or anything like that ever talked about it. The only person I ever remember talking about it was a friend of mine in high school whose dad had some sort of a computer algorithm thing that would like trade stocks for him, which it basically had a mutual fund. He had a mutual fund and I didn't understand what it meant, but I was thinking like, oh, that's so cool. He must be making a lot of money. And I had no idea anything. I didn't even know that was a world I can go into.
Yeah.
So when my dad's saying like, oh, we just lost everything because the stock market went down, even in truth, my dad didn't have any money in the TSP, didn't have any money in the stock market. So we didn't lose anything, but it made it this thing that I never even heard about seem even.
Interesting. Yeah, that's, you gotta be so careful what you tell the kids, I guess people in general, but kids especially, they're so impressionable.
Yeah, especially when they're your kids, right? And it's so tough because whenever I ask a person, what did your parents teach you about money? Every single person, 99% of the time goes, my parents taught me nothing about money. My parents, they didn't teach me anything. And then as we start going down the rabbit hole of like, well, tell me what your thoughts on credit cards are, or tell me on your thoughts on investing, tell me your thoughts on buying a house. And then they'll start to go down this rabbit hole of like, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. And I'll ask, why do you think that? And then they'll go down, they'll be like, well, because my parents said this. I'm like, oh, so your parents did teach you something.
Yeah.
And then we keep on going down there. There's a research study that shows that most people's money memories and their money habits are formed by the age of 7 years old. So if you're going to be an abundant spender, a hyper accumulating saver, someone that is going to invest their money, someone that's going to hoard all their money, most of that has been developed by the time you're 7 years old. And for me, like the reason I think my life is so special and the reason that I try to bring this out there, not that I'm saying I'm special in any way, is because by the time I was 7, my thought process was I'm going to save my way to wealth. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get a good job. And then somehow everything's just going to magically work out for myself. And that's what I believe. That's what I hoped was going to happen. We've talked about it many times, but hope isn't a strategy. And eventually I had to come to the realization that everything that I built my foundation on of what life was and how life was going to be successful for me was fundamentally flawed. And it was very, very hard to look at myself and think that everything that I've kind of created for myself, this identity, the way that I'm going to live my life, wasn't going to work. And I had to go back to the drawing board and cut everything down and be willing to start again. And that's the reason I talk so much about you aren't your ideas. You're not your body. You're not your mind. You're the amalgamation of all those things. And I think that's why people get so freaked out. Talking back to Paul, being afraid to tell their kids like, hey, this is where I messed up, because that they identify that if I messed up, then that means I am a bad person. I am a messed up person. But I've had to create myself to say, I may not be the smartest person in the room, but I am the person that will always continue to learn and get better. And it's just that little shift, right? I can walk into a room and be the stupidest person and be okay with that. I'm not happy that I'm the stupidest person in the room, but I'm okay with that. But I know that if I can outwork people, I think I was blessed with the ability to be born smart, but I was also born smart enough to know how dumb I am.
I like that. I think that's more powerful. I would much rather be that than the opposite. So I want to just go back to Monday's pod real quick and talk a little bit more about the key takeaways, right? What were the top 3 things that you learned? Or if you want to share a few, I can share a few. What do you got?
Yeah, so I think what I we didn't really go into as deep as I wanted to in the podcast. So let's go over it right now. Was what his book talked about, lasting wealth, and I think the first thing that we or what I wanted to talk about was the family legacy. And by the family legacy, I mean like creating the family narrative. I think all human beings, we work in a narrative format. We love stories. Like if I tell you a story, everyone shuts the hell up and they just listen to the story, regardless of the story has anything to do with what we're talking about. But if you have a family story as to this is where we come from, this is the reason that we're growing, this is the reason, this is what we're all trying to get to, it gives everyone a direction that we're pointing towards. And I kind of think of Game of Thrones. Like all of the great houses in Game of Thrones, they all had a saying. Like a Lannister always repays his debts. Winter is coming for the Starks. And each one of those sayings also came with a story of the people that we are. For the Starks, it's like winter is coming, so we're always getting ready. We have to be strong family because we don't know when the tough times are going to come. So we're always prepared. The Lannisters were we don't put ourselves into debt because we're the rich people. So we always repay things because we know it's going to come back to us tenfold. And every single family had their own little thing. But what's your family legacy? What's your family motto? And if you don't have one, sit down with your partner, sit down with yourself, and start to think like, what do I want? If I had kids, if I had this nuclear family, what would I want my legacy to be? What would I want my goals to be? My wife and I, we had a discussion as to when we have our kids, what are the core values we want to teach them? Like, and I kind of talked about like the power of strength and extreme ownership. And we talked about things, and my wife brought up things that she talked about, like, being emotionally regulated to feel your emotions both ways. And then, how does that conflict with strength? And we have to have those discussions, because my version of strength might be going too far in one direction, and her emotional, like always feeling your emotions regardless of the situation, is also to another extreme. So it's the dichotomy there that we build together. But I think a lot of it comes down to the narrative, the family legacy that most people don't have.
That's wow. That's powerful. Yeah. That's super powerful. That saying winter is coming, so we're always prepared. Holy, I've always heard like winter is coming, like as the joke of whatever. But to hear it in that context, like this is our family motto, and we're always prepared for what comes around the corner. No matter what it is, we're prepared because we always, in the front of our mind, we know winter is coming. That is,
Yeah.
that's sick.
And that family legacy, right? That story, what that feeds into is your values and your principles. Like the winter is coming, like it's a statement. And yes, that statement sounds good, but it's the story behind the reason that we have this statement. And then the values and principles that we glean from that story that we're telling. So our values are that we're always prepared, that we are strong, that we are dependent on ourselves only,
Yeah.
that we're not trying to over leverage ourselves, whatever it is. I don't know. And I'm not going to tell you what your story is, but the story means one thing. The story is important, but it's the values and the principles that you assign to the story or that you glean from the story itself. And two people can look at the same story and get two different things from it. If you and I were to watch Inception, the movie, and I love the way that it ends, is because you and I could both come away with very different endings. Is he still in the dream or is he not in the dream? And in truth, we're both right because it's whatever we got.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the things about this story of his life, it kind of impressed, it's hard to say, like it really made me think of how important family is and trusting one another. I know he didn't have the most loving relationship with his mother. I know he talked a little bit about how he was never unconditionally loved as a child, and I feel like that's just the saddest thing because as a child you should be unconditionally loved. But it's the person he built him, he built. I think there's a lot of things you can substitute, but having a great family that you trust is not one of them. Obviously, he's a child, right? He can't be the foundation. But when he has kids or had kids, I'm not sure, but
Yeah, he has kids.
he has kids. Now that he has kids, I'm sure that he shows them that family love. He shows them that unconditional love. He shows them that, you can trust me to make sound decisions. And I love that. I like how someone can be from a bad background or a troubled background and things maybe go bad and come out the other end smelling like roses, right? And being in a much better place. Dude, I just, it kind of breaks my heart a little bit, the secrets that were kept from him all those years.
It's tough to hear about it and like all the things he went through. But I think the reason that I really respect Paul from coming on here is because he took ownership of all of it. I
Yeah.
think too many people in our culture today, they'll have Paul's story, oh, I was lied to by my parents, my mom didn't love me conditionally, and then they'll play victim. And that's the reason that I can't be successful. That's the reason that I can't be a lawyer, that I can't have the things that I want. But Paul took ownership of it and said, like, yeah, these things happened to me. And do they suck? 100% they suck. And now what? And now what do I do with that information? He said that when he went into being a lawyer, since he was always told by his parents, this is how you feel. Like, we don't care about how you actually feel. I'm going to tell you how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And, if that's what happens to your whole life, you lose the ability to argue. Like, you don't even know to argue that, like, I don't feel that way. So imagine that you now become a lawyer where your job is to, and he said, like, when he became a lawyer, it was extremely difficult for him to be a lawyer because someone's telling you the way they feel and you're supposed to tell them the way you feel. But if your whole life you've been told the way that you're supposed to feel and someone's telling you that, it'd probably be everything against him would scream like red alert. This person's telling me how to feel. Just agree with them. Agree with them to be happy, to be loved, to feel that I belong. The bond between an infant and their mother and their father is the most extreme thing. And I talked to Paul about this, that when he was born, he was perfect. Everything, like every one of us are perfect the way we are. Even if we're a little shit, it's the story that that the parents are putting on why the baby's acting this way. So we're supposed to be loved unconditionally, but that's not the way the world works. It just doesn't. Your parents aren't perfect. And Paul could have said, like, my parents screwed me up, and now that means I'm going to go and screw my kids up because woe is me. And if it happened to me, then I should do it to somebody else. But at some point, you need to be the one that steps up and break that generational sin and say, yeah, my parents taught me this one thing, and I realize how effed up I am because of it. And I don't want to do the exact same thing. We're always trying to get a little bit better. And you're going to screw your kid up in a different way. But ideally, we're moving up in a good line where our kids' lives are better than our lives. And I think that's why there's so many people who are upset right now in our world, especially on the internet. When you go on there, it's because for the first time in human history, our generation might not do better than our parents' generation. So what do? Do we lament that experience and say, like, it's not fair? I can't do anything about it because I was fucked over because of, I went to college because I was told to go to college. I took on all this debt because I took on all this debt. I can't buy a house because houses are too expensive. And we just say, like, I'm not going to do anything now and I'm just going to do drugs and bitch online? Or do you say, okay, all these things are stacked against me. Yes, all this is true and all this sucks. And now what am I going to do about it? Am I going to go and try to make the world the way I want it to be? Or am I just going to sit here at my couch and complain all day? And it really does have to come down to that extreme ownership. And I think that's like one of the most important things is you can agree that, yes, everything sucks. And now what? I think it was Marcus Aurelius that said, never let other people hear you complaining. But more importantly, don't let yourself hear you complaining. So even when you're complaining, don't even let yourself complain to yourself. Say, like, this is the situation. Don't try to pass judgment on it. If it's good or bad, this is the situation. And this is what I'm going to do about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's beautiful. If you guys want to get the full podcast, I would highly, highly, highly recommend checking out Monday's episode. But I think, do you have anything else to add, Chris, before we go on?
Yeah, before we go on to the Fight Friday feedback, I'm going to talk about one experience that I had this weekend in Pittsburgh. While I was there with a lot of people who grew up in America, experienced all the greatest things. If you're an American, you're listening to this and you make over $35,000, you're in the top 1% of the world. So just think about that right now, that you are in the top 1% of the world if you make $35,000 and were born and live in America. Like, you have a level of privilege more than anyone else. And I'm not going to say that doesn't mean that your life isn't hard. But you have to also realize that there is a privilege to that. And when we were there, we got on the subject of some of the people were talking about, like, oh, how terrible America is and how bad all of our issues are and all this stuff. And, complain is what I was hearing. So when we got in our Uber ride from the airport over to the hotel, our Uber driver was this young man from from Iraq. And I kind of asked him, like, oh, what brought you to America and stuff like that. And he was telling me that he was in Iraq on the day that the Americans pulled out. He was a translator for the American army. And when America left, he had to leave with America because had he stayed, he would have died. He would have been murdered, just like most other people. So he escaped on a plane with a bunch of army guys to Houston, Texas. He came, he spoke English because luckily he spoke English because he was the translator, but he came to this country knowing nothing about it, but with the ability to know, like, I can make myself better. And at least here I have a life. And he still has a wife who's still in Iraq that he hasn't been able to get out. And he knows that every single situation is stacked against him. But he's driving Uber to put himself through school. He's going to Pennsylvania State right now, and he wants to get a major in business. You tell me that this man, and like, it makes me sad that this man had a substantially harder life than anyone that I talked to this weekend. Yet he's still fighting. He's taking it on himself. So what can I do to get better? I'm not going to sit here and lament that I was born in Iraq, that that terrorists came and they took over the country, that all this stuff happened. He's going to say, what can I do right now to make myself better so that I can help my family, and then thereby affecting the world? So many people will bitch and complain all day long about how tough the world is, how bad everything is, but they're not willing to look at themselves to say, what can I do to make myself better? Because you can't affect the world unless you're willing to affect yourself and change yourself. So yeah, it was just one thing that, like, I talked to him for a while, gave him some business advice, gave him my phone number and everything, but it was a really good reminder to remember that, like, yes, America isn't perfect. We have screwed up in many, many, many different ways. But at the end of the day, we have an ideal that we're always striving for. We're striving to be better people. And there are countries in this world that the ideal is what it currently is. And what it currently is a shit show.
Wow. I got chills so many times during that story. Wow. That's unbelievable.
Yep. We talked about it for a while. He told me some stories, and it was insane to, like, think about it. And that's the reason I love traveling so much to different countries. Like getting to go to Mexico, getting to go to even, like, the nicer countries like Bora Bora and Tahiti. You get to actually see other people's experiences. And for the first time, the veil that you think the world, like, operates on of, like, oh, everything's hunky-dory happy except for here in America, you realize, like, even the people in Tahiti who was in the prominent, like, it's beautiful. Like, they wake up in beauty every single day. But also, those Tahitians are really living, like, very stark, like, on the razor's edge all the time. Of, like, if I don't make money today, we don't eat. Like, it really is that close.
Yeah, life is a lot. Wow, that's crazy. I was gonna say, for, like, the people that were at the event you were at and you heard them complaining, and the person who was in a terrible situation not complaining, life is all about perspective. We talked about it at length last podcast, or I don't know if it was last podcast, but I know we've talked about it before. Life is all about how you look at it. It's all about how you look at it. You can have a great life or you can have a bad life, and it's all dependent on how you look at it.
Yep. And that's the hard part, right? Is that we always compare ourselves to other people. And we've said it before that comparison is the thief of joy, but I'm going to take it a step further than that. It's not comparison as a thief of joy. It's the judgment you put on that comparison. So this young man that I met from Afghanistan who came to this country, yes, he compares himself to Jeff Bezos. He compares himself to other people. And he's comparing himself, and it's not stealing his joy. The judgment he's putting on that is, I can do that too. If I work hard here in this country, I can do that too. When there's other people who compare themselves to Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and then the judgment they're putting on that is envy, that I deserve that too, rather than I can do that too. And if you want to have Jeff Bezos' life, Elon Musk's life, whatever, that doesn't mean that you just get all the results. You have to take all the turmoil, all the pain, all the suffering, the multiple marriages, the sleepless nights, the losing your hair at 20 years old because of all the stress. All that shit. You take all of that in order to get it. You just don't get the results. You have to take everything with it. You take all the story. And I think most of us, I would think of, like, Taylor Swift. Like, if I could switch lives with Taylor Swift right now, would I? No, I wouldn't. Because while she may be the most famous person in the world, amazing pop star, love Taylor Swift to death, I would not want to have her life. I would not want to be able to not leave my house, not have any anonymity, because you take all of it. Mm-hmm. I'm sure she's living a great life. Like, blessed be to Taylor, but
it's not
that wouldn't be what I want.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're a Swiftie.
Oh, bro. Yeah. Well, my wife's a Swiftie, and I have become more and more of a Swiftie.
I knew it.
Dude, I grew up with her. When I was in high school, like, her first album came out, and, like, I was all about it.
So cool. What a turn, dude. The jujitsu badass is a Swiftie. I like it. I like it. Always finding something new about you, Chris. That's what I like about you. Like a good book. Anyway, with that being said, I think it's time we move on to viewer mailbag. This is the part of the podcast where a viewer will write in, and Chris and I will we'll talk about it. We'll give our advice, mostly Chris, because he's the financial wizard here. I'm just the student. But today I will be reading, as I always do. So for today's letter, I will soon have a sudden windfall, and my attempt to spend nothing for a full year. Kind of interesting. Let's get into it. Howdy, Fi guys. Growing up, life was a constant struggle. My childhood was marked with the kind of poverty that many would find hard to imagine. My mother, the absolute sole breadwinner, juggling multiple low-paying jobs just to make ends meet. Despite her relentless efforts, we often found ourselves barely scraping by. The electricity would occasionally flicker off, a stark reminder of overdue bills, and our pantry would often be bare, forcing us to rely on food banks and the community to donate. The shoes on my feet were always one size too small, or riddled with holes, because buying new ones was simply not an option. This was the normal American poverty we endured, where every day was a battle for basic.
Yeah. So let's stop right there. I recently read a study that said that, obviously envy is going up in this world. Like there are more people who want more. And I think a lot of it has to do with social media, obviously, but also TV. Like television, when it came out back in the 50s, I think, 60s, when television first came on, like it was Leave It to Beaver. And the family that you got to like see yourself or compare yourself against was a normal American family. Nowadays, if you turn on a television show, you don't see poverty very often. The only time you're watching a show about poverty, it's going to be a really sad show, but the average show is showing like Keeping Up with the Kardashians, or people are just extravagantly rich all the time. That plus so that's your normal. You're comparing yourself to these people's quote unquote normal. Then additionally, you go onto social media and you're comparing yourself to people's normal, which is only the highlights that they want you to see of their life. They're not showing you the shitty parts of life. They're only showing you the sad parts or the happy parts. And most of the time, those happy parts probably aren't even real. They're going onto some jet that they found somewhere and they're taking photos in front of it as if it's their jet when it really isn't.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of a weird.
Compare yourself to the right person. So like this guy, if you're thinking that your life is hard right now and because you're living a middle-class lifestyle and you can't buy your second house, compare yourself to this guy and you'll see how like less blessed you are. Or compare yourself to my freaking Uber driver who was from Iraq and his wife still isn't here because he had to flee his country.
Absolutely. My mom always, when I was a kid, my mom always used to tell me, I remember the day when we were kids, I've worked tirelessly to build a better life, climbing the ranks in the sales industry through sheer determination and grit. Now, as I stand on the brink of closing a massive deal, I'm set to receive a substantial commission check. This financial windfall presents a unique opportunity for me to create a safety net for my family. My plan is to invest a year's worth of supplies, ensuring that we have everything we need to minimize our reliance on regular shopping trips. With a 1,000 square foot garage and a large utility closet at my disposal, I have ample space to store bulk purchases. My strategy is to buy bulk from large retailers such as Sam's Club, BJ's, or Costco's, or any local open box store that offers a significant discount to unsold items. By September,
so he's taking this in a very different direction than I expected him to with the money.
I didn't see this coming. I didn't see this coming at all. No, this is by September, I aim to accumulate enough supplies to cover all our needs for a year. This includes food, clothing. I don't understand the clothing one. Food, clothing, cleaning supplies, I get that. And even Christmas gifts. Interesting. The goal is to reduce shopping trips to zero, allowing us to save close to 100% of our income and set aside. Okay, I see. Okay, so he says to set aside 100% of our income as possible, okay? Aside from regular reoccurring expenses like mortgages, internet, and phone, and insurance. Okay, yeah, I was wondering, like, are you still going to pay your bills, or like, what are we doing here? Like, we're just going to defer that to like.
I'm just going to press pause. I defer. I'm just going to press defer. We're just going to I call shenanigans. I get a year. It's done.
Exactly. For perishable goods, I plan to invest in a couple chest freezers. Okay, that's kind of like what you have, Chris, right? It's like the ones you can basically get into.
Yes, I have a very large chest freezer, which is currently a cold plunge, but
It's a crisp stew, basically, enabling us to store fresh meats and produce. Non-perishables will include canned foods, dry foods, preservatives, and pickled items. By stockpiling these essentials, I hope to create a buffer against any financial uncertainty to ensure my children never experience the insecurity that marked my early years. What are your thoughts on this approach? I'd love to hear your experience and any advice you may or may not have on this plan and making it a success. From rags to riches, I'll break the cycles, stitches, because I'll be stocking up with pride, so I'll never be denied. Did we become a prepper podcast?
we are now.
We are now. I won't deny this. Chris and we listen. I like prepping, but I'm not in that stage of life yet. I'm not there yet. Don't get it twisted. I would love to have a bunker. Why?
Yes.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
But this took me by surprise.
No, when he said he's going to make more money, I was just like, oh, great. I was not expecting that he was going to say that we're going to basically prep for a year and not have to spend any money. So to our listener, the first thing I want to say is, look how far you've come. You've really made it. Like, again, you compare yourself to where you started. You know, it's really sad, but the best predictor of one's success has nothing to do with their intelligence, has nothing to do with the parents they were born to. It has to do with the zip code they were born in. And that is a very sad statement to say, that the zip code you're born in has more predictive powers on your future success than anything else. But that also means that people that pull themselves out of those things, because I think the inner cities, like, it's one of the strongest, it's one of the ways to become one of the strongest people in the world. If you can make it through an inner city and make it out of that experience and find success, you will be one of the toughest people. But the issue with the inner city is that it breaks most people that it touches. There's only a very select few that can find the right mindsets to tell themselves the right story to make it through that experience without succumbing to I'm not worthy, I'm not any of these things. So I understand where it's coming to. I always like to go back to people's childhood to figure out where they're coming from today when it comes to money. And when I heard this guy's story, which I'm glad that he put it in there, of that I grew up with insecurity, food insecurity, housing insecurity, all these things. And now it sounds like instead of trying to create financial security, he's trying to break down from food insecurity. I think the food insecurity is the biggest thing that's driving him right now, based off what I just heard with the deep freezers and the canned meats and all that stuff. Right now, I don't know what his lifestyle is. I don't know where he lives. I don't know anything like that. But it sounds like he is still trying to overcome the food insecurity that he dealt with as a child. Something that isn't the issue that he's dealing with right now. But he still feels that it's the most important thing because it happened to him during his most formative years. And like I said earlier, by the age of 7, you have basically formulated your thoughts on how money works. And right now, what I think he's formulated is it's feast or famine. And I'm about to feast, so I better get mine while I have it. Because he grew up with his mom seeing like, I actually had to work so hard, and it was either all or nothing. And I don't know, maybe he grew up, I see this a lot with families that don't have a lot. It's, hey, I just got this bonus check. Let's spend this money real quick. And they'll go and they'll blow all the money. And now they're inside the same exact situation rather than how can I save that? Because they think that if I keep this money, it's going to be taken from me. Because unfortunately for a lot of those families who especially immigrated from other countries, they were exactly right. That money was taken from them. And in many ways, due to inflation, that money is still being taken from them here in America. But unlike other countries, you have the ability to invest that money into producing assets that other countries just don't have all the time. So what are some of your thoughts on this one? This definitely went in a different direction than I thought it was going to.
I mean, I like the idea of stockpiling food, so long as it doesn't go bad. Because I don't like wasting food. I agree with what you're saying. I think it's important to plan for the future. It kind of breaks my heart a little bit, though, because if he's like, as soon as I get a huge check coming, huge, can take care of us. First thing I'm thinking about, food. I can only imagine how many times he had to go to bed hungry, wake up hungry, go to lunch when all the kids are eating and he didn't have anything. Like, that must be a deep, deep pain weighing on his shoulders. I could never understand it, but it doesn't take a psychologist to understand that it's still sitting with him. Right? He wants to take care of his family in ways that he wasn't taken care of. And that's commendable. I highly respect it. I respect it. but once you turn your money into food, you can't turn your food back into money, right?
Yeah,
But
not as easily.
It's not as easily unless you're selling cakes, right? And that's not what he wants to do. I understand where he's coming from. I don't disagree with saving up money or saving. Well, obviously, I don't disagree with saving up money. I don't disagree with saving up food, right? I probably wouldn't go a year, but again, personal finance is personal. If we're still talking about personal finance, I don't know if we're still talking about personal finance at this point.
I don't think we are. I think right now we're talking about a story of, I think he's thinking that like, once I get this windfall, I'll finally have the money to, even if he sets himself up for a year, like life doesn't stop there.
No.
And there are some like big risks that I'm thinking of when it comes to this stuff. Number one is, I don't know where you live in the country, bro, but I know that I'm here in Arizona. And here in Arizona right now, it is the summertime. And if we have a power outage and you lose your chest freezers that's full of meat, or all that meat's gone. If the pipes burst and now there's water all over the floor, all of your freaking toilet paper is gone. Like, whatever it is that you have, you're really dependent on that to work out. And, you know, Dom and I would think about it that, like, if I had a year's worth of shit in my garage, that is now a year's worth of concern that I have in my brain that something's going to go wrong. And how much is that mental bandwidth worth it to you? To be like, what if someone breaks into my garage? What if I leave and I forget to close the garage? Like, all of that concern and fear. What if there's a fire and like now you lost all that money?
Yeah,
that's gone. I mean,
what a year's worth of groceries? That's expensive. That's a lot of money. That's very expensive.
And we also need to think about the time value of money, right? Like, yes, he now has this food and stuff, but we also have to think that what could this money have done if not bought a year's worth of food? Could it have been invested in the markets? Could I maybe take my family on a vacation? Like something like, what things could we have done there? Are you and your wife aligned? Are you and your spouse aligned on this journey together to see like what's best? Because what I think would be the worst thing is like you and your wife, you're like on rocky times and stuff like that. And maybe we could invest in like couples therapy or stuff like that to like maybe get our life back together. But instead of that, I'm going to buy a year's worth of food. And I could guarantee you that you're going to lose a lot more money by getting a divorce than you would on, you know, losing a year's worth of food. So, I mean, I don't know the situation, obviously, what's going on there, but it concerns me that we maybe have the ability to create up an emergency fund. An emergency fund where we could have 3 to 6 months of ability to ensure that we can make through those emergencies so that your kids don't have to be insecure when it comes to food and stuff like that. But instead, we're going to sacrifice that in order to have a year's worth of food and clothes and gifts and stuff inside the year, with the thought that I'm not going to want to buy anything else, which we all know is not true. I bet you most people listening to this, because if you're listening to this, it means you have a device that allows you to listen to this. So you're already in like the top 2% of the world. Like, so good for you. If you're listening to us, you've already made it. If I gave you everything that you wanted, if you had everything that you wanted, look around what you have pretty much everything at your disposal, you still want more. And my concern is it's going to get all this stuff and they're still going to go shopping. They're still going to see things. They're still going to have Amazon. They're still going to see more. And those desires are still going to be there. They're still going to spend more money. I really doubt the 100% savings rate that he's assuming is going to happen will happen, because also we have the fixed costs of the mortgage, the insurance, all that other stuff. Like, that's probably already taking up 50 to 60 to, for most people, 70% of their income.
Yeah. I don't know. Could we compromise on 3 months? You know?
Yeah. Or maybe just like a few months. I guess I'm wondering, like, what's his concern? Is he thinking like there's going to be another pandemic and stuff? And if I had a year, at least I would know I'd have a year. But even like at the depths of the pandemic, like, yeah, you couldn't get milk. But like, if you can't survive without milk, like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, drink some water, I guess. But even at the depths of the pandemic, when supply chains were really, really wrecked, I could still go to my store and get food. Could I get the food that I wanted to get? But there was never a time where I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to eat.
Yeah. And your pantry was, I mean, you're a common American, right? Your pantry's not empty. You don't wait till your pantry's completely empty. Fridge empty. Now I'm going to go to the store. Like, no, like your pantry and fridge hasn't been empty since the day you moved in. 100%. There's always going to be food. And it's crazy. Like, I'm trying to do this right now. I'm trying to eat everything in my house, in the pantry and in the kitchen, not like the couch. I'm trying to clear out my food, right? I want to see how long it takes me, right? It's taking me so long. And what's interesting is like normally I would already have went and got groceries by now, but there's still stuff in the freezer. There's still stuff in the pantry. It's like, well, let's try and cycle through this. So the food that we have actually lasts a lot longer than we think, right? So while you might buy food for a year, are you gonna now that I have 16 packs of Oreos in the garage, am I gonna go crazy? Because normally I'll have like maybe an Oreo or two a week. Now I'm having Oreo two a day. You know, maybe you're gonna
discipline.
Overeat now. You know?
Yeah, it would be tough. You know, I think a lot of the formative years I had was when I was a wrestler, and when people would sit there and they're like, my wife especially, she'll look in our pantry and like in our fridge and be like, "There's nothing to eat." When like, of course, like the pantry's full and the fridge is full and the freezer is full of food.
Yep.
And you know, when I hear that, I think back when I was wrestling, and like when I was wrestling and I was starving myself to like lose 10 pounds in order to like win a meet. You don't know what true hunger is until you will literally eat anything to survive. What's even worse than the hunger is the thirst. Like, so if you're saying like, "Oh, I'm so hungry, there's nothing to eat," like you don't know what pain is. Like, pain is when the thirst comes on. That's far worse than the pain of food. But you know, when I hear that, like, I need more food, or we don't have any food, or anything like that, it's like, you're not hungry enough to say that we don't have enough food. Because if you were really hungry, you would eat whatever's inside. You'll eat cat food if you like need to, if you're that hungry. So to our listener, what I would do first off, if I was him and I was trying to offer some advice, first off, I would evaluate the risks. What's the opportunity cost of not having that money? Because now I don't know how much money you're going to get on this windfall, but before we start counting our eggs too, let's make sure that before we start buying the deep freezers, because we're also going to lose a lot of money on buying a bunch of deep freezers, buying shelves, buying all that stuff that isn't going towards your bottom line. You know, right now, I don't think that we're going to have inflation isn't going to go backwards. Things aren't going to get cheaper. I agree with that. It definitely won't. But I think right now you're so concerned on what can I do to have the food so that I'll feel happy. But just think about the risks of what happens if the freezers go out. What happens if something goes wrong? What happens if there's a flood, a fire? All that stuff is gone. The next thing I would do in order to kind of help with that, if you decide that maybe the buying the food thing isn't the best move, is I would really focus on building an emergency fund. We have a cushion of 3 to 6 months. With you having kids, I would definitely go to the 6 months. Like 3 months with kids, like, it's all about your risk and your ability to get another job and how quickly that's going to go. Also think about your liquidity. Do you have cash available that is liquid? So if you have money, that's great. You don't have to go and put it into some freaking like interval fund that you can't take it out of. You can put it into just a bank CD or even just a savings account or something like that that's liquid. And then the money that is above the 6 months or 12 months or whatever your emergency fund is, we can put that into the S&P 500 or into the NASDAQ or into the Dow or into a broadly diversified index of funds. After that, like, I really want you to focus on compound interest and diversification. And we really want to invest, if we are going to invest some of that money above the emergency fund, we're going to invest it in the long term. If you're saying, "Hey, I need this money in a year because next year I want to go ahead and buy whatever it is, buy more deep freezers or whatever it is I want to buy," then we don't want to put that money in the market. You know, you're not going to put the money in the market and tomorrow I want it to double. And then by Tuesday, I want to double again. And by Wednesday, it'll double one more time. And then I'm going to win. If that's the way you think it's going to happen, just walk into a casino and start playing blackjack. Because at least when you lose your money, you'll feel like you had fun.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That's a fair statement. Yeah, I hope that his financials are in order in regards to the crisis fund, the emergency fund, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I would think that him saying this makes me think that he doesn't have a budget. He doesn't know how much he spends a year or anything like that. Because if he did, then he would know, like, hey, typically, like, or on the worst months, and that's the reason that I break down my budget into essential and non-essential, because I know essential is like the mortgage and the utility payments and just the food at the grocery stores. I think a lot of people, they think that, you know, if I ran out of money, I'm going to die and it's over. But most people, they just don't run out of money and they die. They adapt. You adapt to your new normal and you figure it out. You know, I see it a lot with my retired clients of like, "Oh, well, what happened if I run out of money in my investment accounts? What happens if there's a 50% drawdown? What happens if this happens or this happens?" It's not like, if we have a financial plan that says we can withdraw $20,000 a year from your portfolio and you'll be okay. And the winds go against us, and now we can't draw down $20,000. We can only draw down, I don't know, $15,000. It's not like you're going to be that person that goes, I said $20,000. I have to take out $20,000. You're going to adapt to the new normal and figure out how can I live off 15,000 instead of 20. Is that going to suck? Yeah, you just lost 25% of your income. Of course that sucks, but you're going to figure it out. You're not going to just run it down to the ground because we're not a computer simulation where we have to do this. We're human beings and we will adapt. Same with you, listener. You will adapt. So create a budget, know what your spendings are, and then from there we can start to figure out, okay, I have this much money in savings. I have this much month of cushion that my kids will not have to worry about it. And if you have that, I think you'll be able to finally pull yourself out of the weeds, see that you're not food insecure, that you're in a fine position, which will allow you to start thinking about the long-term goals. Because right now, what I'm hearing is that I'm focused on making food right now. Like I need to have this right now. And when you're focused on surviving right now, you're not thinking 3, 4, 5 steps in the future. You're not thinking about what happens when I reach retirement. You're thinking about how am I surviving right now? And from what I'm hearing, that was the way you grew up, but that is not the situation that you're in right now because you have worked hard. You put yourself through all this stuff. It was your grit, your tenacity to get you this sales role that allow you to close this business, allows you to do whatever it is that you're doing right now so that you're not in that situation. But your brain is putting you back in the situation that you had in the childhood. But that's not the situation you're in anymore. So think of this thought. Does this thought serve me? Does the thought of I am food insecure, everything's about to get pulled out from under me, does that serve you in your current junction in life? I would argue that it doesn't, but only you can make that decision. So maybe think about therapy.
With that being said, best of luck. And
you got this, man. Whatever you decide, I'm with it.
Yeah, whatever you decide, man. It's your life. You're the master of your own destiny. So run it up.
Yeah. And one thing that I always try to do is, regardless if I agree with you or disagree with you, I'm going to take the opposite side. Yeah. Just because I want to know that you thought it through. Because right now, I mean, I don't know, maybe he's talking to all of his doomsday prepper buddies and they're like, that's such a good idea. But until someone else from another point of view says like, hey, what about this? He's never going to think about that. And obviously he wouldn't think about that because it's a blind spot and you can't see your blind spots because by definition, they are blind spots.
Well, good luck. And maybe you'll write back into us. We'd love to hear from you again. Please. With that being said, we're going to get on to win of the week, kind of close it out a little bit happier. This one wasn't actually too sad.
This Friday feedback was
no, it wasn't. It wasn't bad. We've had some like dark ones in the past. This one was actually pretty solid. Like, I want to save more food. Like, dude, that's cool.
You do you. Yeah, you do you, man.
Yeah, it's your life, man. It's not like I was XYZ, blah 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 blah, and then bam. It's like, no, this one was a good one. Alrighty, so win of the week, Chris. Would you like to go first for win of the week?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go first. So I've been feeling really good about. Over the past 2 weeks, I had a few people in my life who have come to me, family members, friends, yourself included, Dominic, who have come to me to bring up issues that they're really dealing with. And, I've been thinking a lot about offering a financial coaching or maybe just a coaching side of Monzon Wealth of my business. And after these few days of doing this, and I see, if you don't mind, Dominic, I've seen in you after we did I think you and I had an hour and a half long conversation. And I've seen in you just in these past few weeks of how much more you've advanced with me being open, me just kind of getting you to maybe look at life in a little bit different way. And it's happened again with family members and friends. And recently I got a text from someone that I helped out who said hey, thanks so much for talking with me and just telling me what was real and what's not real and what's going on in my head. And, since the things we've talked about, I've made these changes in my life. I've actually read the books, or I'm reading the books that you told me to read into. And I actually have a job interview tomorrow with this company that I wanted to work with and all this stuff. And, when I think about that, it's I had an hour to an hour and a half long conversation with these friends and these family members and yourself included. And, for an hour and a half of my time, something that I didn't have to prep for, all this knowledge is already in my head. The way of thinking is already in my head. I was able to kind of maybe set you down a path that could really have saved you a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of suffering that now you get to take for the rest of your life and kind of move forward with. So, getting those texts and hearing that from not only from you, Dominic, but from other people. I talked to 4 people this past week and in these past few weeks, and all 4 people have said thank you so much. What the things that you said to me, effectively changed my life. Even up over what my therapist said or what my family said, what I needed to hear was exactly what you said. And I don't know what it is that I'm saying. I don't know what it is that I'm doing, but I'm happy that it's working. And I think I do know what it is. It's that I'm vulnerable too. And I've experienced a lot of hardships in my life too. So I can actually come to it from the ability to say that. And I'm not afraid to say like, I'm perfect, because I'm not perfect. And I tell people like, I see where you're at and I've been there. And this is what I did to get through it. Not to say that my way's right, but this is what I did. And you can always try it.
It's awesome. Dude, my win of the week is going to suck after that. So I learned how to make pancakes this week. No, it's like, no, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's awesome, Chris. That's super cool.
Yeah.
I was while you were speaking, I was thinking, I mean, you could open up a whole new business. Chris Monzon, life coach. Yeah, I love it.
Nah.
And I know like life coach gets a bad stigma. You know, it's got like
it definitely has a bad stigma. That's why I never looked at it.
Yeah. Have you seen those videos of like 18-year-olds being life coaches? It's like the funniest thing. Yeah, it's like you're fresh out the womb. What do you mean? You've lived nothing. You've done nothing. What do you mean life coach? You haven't lived. I need someone.
Yeah, but I was talking to my wife about it yesterday, and like, I guess I've been able to kind of like reframe things that like, yeah, tough things happen to me. Tough things have happened to me in my life, and they still continue to happen. But I was telling my wife that like, rather than looking at it like, oh, this sucks and like how bad this is, I've been trying to reframe it to like, how lucky is it that it happened to me and that I know that I can make it through it. And more importantly, I can now take this experience that like sucked and like I've had some shitty experiences and be able to now take that and be like, I see you because I've been there. And I may not know what you're feeling, because obviously you're feeling something different than I felt because we're different people. But I know what this experience was like for me. And by being vulnerable, people are actually willing to listen. And it's kind of like when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Not saying I'm the teacher in any way, shape, or form for these people that I've helped, but it is cool to see like once they were like desperate enough to actually ask for the help, they were actually finally enough to listen to what I had to say. So yeah, small investment in my time to change people's lives is pretty damn cool.
Force for good. That's what it's all about. Being a force for good. I like it. So my win of the week is Chris actually inspired me to, if some of you that don't know this, some of you most of you wouldn't know this, but Chris listens to like podcasts and like videos at like 2x, 3x, and 4x speeds. And he's like, so I'm preparing for, today's podcast, listening to last week's Monday's pod. I decided, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna try and bump up the speeds a little bit. So I went to 1.25, went to 1.1.5, 1.75, got all the way up to 2x, and I could understand it clearly. So that's my win of the week, is now I can consume data at twice the rate of which I could last week. So that's pretty exciting for me. Now I can.
You're basically a superhero. What takes somebody an hour, you can do in 30 minutes now.
Exactly. And you just wait till I go to 4x. You're cooked. I'm just downloading data at this point. I'm straight downloading it. It takes me half the time to download it. That's it.
And it takes me a quarter of the time to download.
I know.
My friends always used to make fun of me because no one knows that I listen to podcasts that fast because it's in my headphones, so no one knows. But my old roommate, he used to know that I did that because he would watch me all day, and he would just say, it's like you're jacking into the Matrix. You're just sitting there like having a seizure as you're like listening to music.
That's honestly, it's the same concept. It's so similar. But yeah, guys, that is it for today's podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I know I did. If you are new here, make sure to hit the subscribe if you're still here, the like, all that fun stuff. Tune in next week. We got a great pod coming up next week. I won't tell you I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you'll just know it's going to be a great one. Any final thoughts, Chris? Maybe a fee for the show?
No, I would just say, if you found value, which I hope you have, if you stuck around, if you like our stories, if you like the way that we banter, please tell a friend about the Fi Guys. Like, subscribe, leave a comment for the algorithm. Let us know what your thoughts are on what we can do to improve, to get better. Just keep on trying to grow, keep on trying to get better, and know that we're always here for you guys. And, the financial independence, like fire, it's spreading. People are getting bigger and badder. So we're here for you guys.
Till then, we'll see you guys later. Later, guys. Later.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the host and guests, not the podcast sponsor. It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.